Today, sundown marks the start of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, and for Muslims around the world, marking it for the second time under strict pandemic protocols. And that, of course, includes Canada's Muslims. There are different restrictions depending on where you live across the country, and that means interesting navigating. In Montreal, for example, Muslims find themselves having to deal with the renewed 8 o'clock curfew. We have a report out of Montreal on all of that now. Kwabena Juro tells us how they're finding the new rules.
Saria Jibrahim enjoys walking, training, and working out. During Ramadan, he does these things at night after breaking fast. But this year, because of the 8 p.m. curfew, that will be tough.
During Ramadan, I usually fast all day and I don't have much energy. And then when nighttime hits, I feel awakened and I want to go outside.
He's not the only one figuring out ways to adjust. Shaheen Ashraf lives alone and doesn't leave the house unless it's to pick up food or groceries. Last year during Ramadan, her daughter would join her to eat after sunset. She says a 9:30 curfew would still allow her to be with her daughter.
It's going to be very different because she won't be able to come, and she'll be alone in her home breaking her fast, and I'll be alone here breaking my fast.
Ashraf says she's not interested in virtual dinners.
And I said, no, thank you. I mean, the whole point is lost, The whole point is to share food, but how am I sharing through a computer?
Look, the mosque is always important. It's important, very important on Fridays, but especially in Ramadan, it is extremely important.
Places of worship are allowed a maximum of 25 people. A 2-meter distance must be maintained at all times unless you are from the same home. A procedural mask must be worn at all times. Many community members say it's better than last year when they were totally shut down.
Unfortunately, this has, with the curfew coming to 8 o'clock, it's going to be just at sunset time. So we're going to be blocked from that. We're going to be blocked from our prayer at sunset time and the prayer which is even later in the night.
Ahmed says he's hoping the curfew will be lifted before the end of the holy month, just in time for Eid. Kwabena Juro, CBC News, Pierrefonds.
Let's talk more about this, the celebration, also keeping Ramadan safe. Dr. Hashim Khan is the co-chair of the Canadian Muslim COVID-19 Task Force. He's also a board member of the Muslim Medical Association of Canada, and he's in Toronto this morning. Dr. Khan, good morning and welcome to our program.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to get to the medical stuff in just a moment, but I'm interested in you personally. You were listening to the report leading into you, and you heard that quote, virtual dinners just don't cut it. Here it is, the holiest time of the year for you, and it's a second pandemic, Ramadan. How are you approaching it in your own mind?
Yeah, this is tough, right? So we had the first Ramadan that was spent in lockdown within our homes, and everyone celebrated them and celebrated having the evening iftar dinner meal with our own families. And for many Canadian Muslims who are celebrating Ramadan even this month, this time around with the third lockdown, it's going to have to be spent with our own families as well. And while we can have, I think, virtual extended iftars with extended family and friends, it's obviously not the same thing, but it's the safest thing to do.
Oh my goodness, the Zoom fatigue, I'm sure, is real for you and families as well across the country. Everyone seems to be experiencing that. It is a little bit different this year, I think, though, isn't it? As you mentioned, last year, that emergency mode and everybody locked down, it was really a fearful time. A little bit different, I would imagine, in the observance this year.
Yes, exactly. I think there's a number of differences compared to last year. So, like you said, last year everything was shut down. The mosque was suspended to the public. There was a national lockdown, and the message was a bit simpler, where we just asked everyone to, observe Ramadan a bit differently within their homes. And this time around, there might be some regional, provincial differences in terms of whether or not gatherings are allowed, to what extent, whether or not your local mosque may or may not be open, which makes it a bit more challenging as well when it comes to trying to weigh the balance between, observing public health recommendations and do things as safely as possible while, the ever-growing threat of the, variants of concern.
Yes. We just heard the report on Quebec's curfews, and that's making things particularly challenging within the province of Quebec and in the city of Montreal. One thing that I remember from my conversations last year at this time with guests about Ramadan was, if this is a time to remember to be thankful and to be grateful, one positive that flowed from that, Dr. Khan, was there was a lot of outreach. There were a lot of meals prepared for takeaway and for various people in need, and it seems to me that that's continuing this year too.
Yes, most definitely. So, this is even outside of a pandemic, Ramadan is a month where Canadian Muslims and mosques and communities step it up in terms of donations and giving to charities and food banks. And that will certainly continue this year as well as last year as well, I think, as part of what we normally do in Ramadan. I think the community will continue to do so. And hopefully this will be the last Ramadan spent during the pandemic. But, this is obviously not what anyone wanted.
No, that was exactly my lead in. Hopefully this will be the last Ramadan of the pandemic. And that is, of course, people are looking to vaccines to make a normal Ramadan observance next year a possibility. Let me turn to questions to you as a doctor and as co-chair of the Canadian Muslim COVID-19 Task Force. I know there are many questions within Canadian Muslims as to whether or not getting a vaccine during Ramadan is allowed, whether it might constitute the breaking of the fast. Can you please answer that question for us this morning?
Yes, for sure. So I just want to clarify and make it clear to everyone that from both a medical as well as a religious perspective, it's quite clear that taking the COVID-19 vaccine or even having a COVID-19 test for that matter does not break the fast. And no one should be delaying their COVID-19 vaccine during Ramadan. So as long as you're eligible within your region to receive the vaccine, get it as soon as possible. And you should be able to still maintain your fast for the most part while getting the vaccine.
So vaccines are all right, testing are all right. And again, you said not just medical, but also spiritual advice that this is not in any way a contravention of what you should be doing at this time of year.
Yes, most definitely. Exactly.
Okay. And then I know you also have put together a series of guidelines, and we have some graphics to illustrate those. What are you suggesting to people in terms of how to celebrate? This is a holiday all about gathering. So what are you suggesting for people to celebrate, to observe Ramadan safely?
Yeah, so, Ramadan is a very special time of month for all Canadian Muslims. It's a time of self-reflection, but also a time where we gather in communities, not just for prayer and congregation, generally speaking, but also, in times where we have dinner and we break fast together in the evenings. And what our recommendations are that, follow your local public health guidance with regards to whether or not your local mosque is open. And if you're going to a mosque, stick with the same local mosque and don't cross regions. The same recommendations that we generally have for when it comes to shopping and haircuts as well. When it comes to breaking the fast meal and having dinners with our families, trying to restrict that just to our immediate household members. Whereas typically, in outside of a pandemic, we would have it and host family, extended family and friends as well. But now with the third wave and variants of concern, I think it's important that, we all do our part, and Canadian Muslims will all do their part to make sure that they're vaccinated, that they're doing whatever they can to curb the spread of COVID-19 within their community.
All right. Thank you very much. Really appreciate meeting you, and that is important information to share on this very special day as you begin the holiest month of the year. Thank you, Dr. Khan.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Dr. Hashim Khan in Toronto this morning.